I said I was going to do this, and I'm doing it. We're today on Chesil Beach. We're going to walk the length of the beach. That is Portland over there. It looks like it's fairly close, but that's 10 miles away. We are going to walk the length of the beach today and survey the gravel. So there is a local legend that fishermen landing on this beach at night or in fog would be able to find out where they were on the beach by simply bending down, picking up a handful of stones, and judging by some properties of the stones, size probably, maybe shape, they could determine whereabouts they were on the beach. Now, why this is important is Chesil Beach is a bank of gravel that links Abbotsbury to, well, it actually goes back the other way, but it links Abbotsbury to the island Portland. Behind it over there is the Fleet Lagoon. You can't get off the beach in the middle, so if you land in the middle, it's quite important to know which way to go to get back to the mainland. That's the theory anyway. So anyway, today we are going to stop at 500-metre intervals along this beach, pick up a standardised handful of gravel, weigh and measure it and record it, and when we get home we'll graph it and we'll see if it really is true that we can determine the position of where we are on the beach by looking at the stones. So in case you want an overview of the beach, up there is the viewpoint from Abbotsbury Subtropical Gardens. There's a viewpoint on the top of the hill. I was there a few weeks ago, and so I took a panoramic view of the beach, which runs all the way from Seatown up there at the sort of northwest end, all the way down to Portland at the southeast end. So here's what that looks like from all the way up there. There's also in sight St Catherine's Chapel. There's a separate video of when I visited St Catherine's Chapel. Anyway, standing here wittering isn't going to get anything done. We've now got to walk 500 metres in that direction and measure some more stones. So this is the kit I'm packing for the trip to Chesil Beach to measure the gravel. Let me just walk you through what we've got here, starting with provisions. So I've got a 2-litre bottle of water. I might try and take an extra one of those. It's a 10-mile walk on gravel in the sunshine. I'm thinking 4 litres of water won't be too much. But I've also got a couple of cans of double espresso. I know that's diuretic, but it's also got some little caffeine boost and a little juice box just so I can have that in my pocket in case I get gasping at one point. And then apart from that, food I've got is kind of high energy, compact stuff that I can eat on the go. So I've got some protein bars, I've got some mixed nuts, roasted but not salted. I will need some salt during the day, but that's going to be provided largely by, well, I might take some extra something else as well. I've got some cabanossi, chili and pork, and I've got some little caramel chocolate shortbread things. I'll probably take at least one other item of food. That's food and drink. Equipment. So GoPro and spare batteries, a power bank for charging the GoPro and my phone. I'm taking my smartphone for GPS and stuff, which is the thing you're now looking at the recorded footage through. What else? Spare socks, a few tissues, some hand sanitizer gel. And then measuring equipment comprises some little scales. These are accurate to 0.1 of a gram, which should be sufficient accuracy for what we're weighing. I'm taking spares of everything. So I've got a spare set of scales in case we break or lose them. And I've got a spare set of batteries for the scales. Reason being, once we get on the beach and start walking, we can't get off. There's no halfway point where you can quit or dip out to a shop or anything like that. The beach is a gravel spit separated from the mainland by the Fleet Lagoon, so you get off at the ends or on a boat. Anyway, calipers, digital calipers. These measure to 1/100th of a millimetre accuracy for measuring my pebbles. Spare batteries for the caliper. Spare calipers. These are not quite as good quality, although they do measure to the same accuracy. And actually testing them, they do seem to be as accurate. It's just the build quality is pretty crummy. They take the same batteries as the other one. These keep turning themselves on as well, so I might actually take the batteries out of there in case we don't need them. So anyway, spare calipers, so duplicates of that. A couple of little measuring sticks. I thought probably what we will do is maybe just put these out in a square like this or something, and then take a photo of each stop, each of our sample points, just put that on the gravel, take a photo so that I can create a kind of animated sequence of the gravel across the whole beach. So we'll take a photo. So I've got, obviously, spares of those. A little light in case we finish in darkness. I've got a spare one of those somewhere as well. I will be digging that out. My notebook, I don't have a spare of, but what we're going to do here is write our weight and measurement observations in here, and as we finish each page I will photograph the page, so we've got a backup of that in the phone. Measuring cup, we'll get 2 of those as well in case one blows away or we lose it or whatever. A couple of pens and a roll of duct tape just in case of the unexpected. That's pretty much it. On top of that there will be the camera that you're looking at this footage through. Obviously hat, coat, sunblock, etc. as well. And the tray. The tray is where we tip out the stones to count them. I will talk about why we've chosen the particular methodology we've chosen. It is all dictated by the fact that we are verifying a local legend, which is that fishermen landing on the beach in fog or at night could pick up a handful of gravel, and by assessing the gravel, presumably by eye or by hand, they're able to find out where they are on the beach. Our measurements are kind of predisposed by trying to verify the reality of that legend or myth. For that reason and other reasons, we're not going to do things like measurement of volume of the stones by displacement, because that's not a thing the fishermen would have done, but also because it means taking water with us to measure the displacement, and a measuring cylinder and equipment, extra equipment to carry. You can't go and get water from the sea because it's dangerous to get down to the shore in some places, and certainly under some weather conditions. People lose their lives on Chesil Beach when they try to get into the surf zone. So won't be doing that. And people did suggest things like taking photographs of the gravel and using software to measure the size of the stones from the photograph. For one thing, I don't think that will be sufficiently accurate. We're talking about sub-millimetre differences in sizes of the stones that we need to measure. And also, we'd only measure them in 2 dimensions if we do that. The stones are all shaped kind of like a flattened jelly bean. So they have a very recognisable length, width and depth. And I'm going to try to measure those 3 dimensions, which you couldn't easily do from a photograph. And also, I just don't think we'd get the accuracy with a photograph, especially as we're talking about measuring from photographs taken across the course of a day where we don't have control of the lighting conditions. Anyway, that's a roundup of the kit and kind of methodology. Let's go and rejoin the explorers on the beach. So this structure here, which we'll have a little closer look at in a moment, these are called dragon's teeth. And these are essentially to stop tanks rolling along that part of the beach. In World War II, they're a defensive structure. There's what remains of a little World War II pillbox there, sunk into the gravel because there's no bedrock here to speak of. So whilst they would have dug some footings for that, and probably dug them quite deep and filled them with concrete, it's built on top of these kind of subspherical gravel granules, and there's nothing really to stop that from shifting. We are now at the point where most people turn back because, as you can see, quite a lot of fishing people along this side, nobody fishing past this point. So this is where we go it alone, but also this is the point of no escape, because as you can see behind the beach here, there's the Fleet Lagoon. So this is the part where Chesil Beach detaches from the mainland and becomes an independent gravel bank that runs all the way along with water on either side until we get to Portland. So really this is the chance to bottle out, call it a day and give up, but we're not going to. Now it does say no access ahead, and there is a nature reserve here, but we've made sure that we're going after the ground nesting bird season. So our little geological survey here is happening after, we're in September now, so that's after the period when ground nesting birds will have eggs on the ground. And so this bit behind the wire here is a bird sanctuary. The foreshore, the tidal part, is Crown Estate, so we have a right of access to that. There are some interesting things to navigate along here, which we'll talk about when we get to them. Anyway, but this bit here is called the Dragon's Teeth. And our third sample point just happens to have landed here, right next to the Dragon's Teeth. So here we ran into a small snag, which is we captured and weighed our sample, and when we tipped it out to count it, there's bits of wood in there. And the question is, do we count these bits of wood in our count or not? And the answer, I don't want to count them because they're not rocks, but also I have already weighed them. So what we decided to do here is we've put all of the stones only back in the pot. We will discard all of this wood, rotten wood. We'll just see if the pot needs topping up with a few more stones to make up for that lost volume, and we'll weigh again and count again. That might seem a bit biased because I'm discarding part of our sample here, but remember, we are here today to verify this story about fishermen. That's the driving force for this entire project, is this local legend about fishermen assessing the stones, not assessing the pieces of detritus amongst the stones. So I feel like that's a valid thing to discard those. I'm going to be careful about what else we discard or accidentally over include in future, but I think this one's valid. We've done 3 samples so far. We're nearly at checkpoint 4. We are now opposite Abbotsbury Swannery. Those little white specks over there are swans. But yeah, so you can see, hopefully this illustrates why you can't get off the beach midway. You can't do half of this job. It's all or nothing. So we are going to have to kind of be mindful, I suppose, of our energy levels, whether we feel like we can make it. Fortunately, the fact that we're stopping every 500 meters and doing a measurement means we've got a very, very accurate measurement of our own progress. So if we get halfway or less than halfway and we feel like we've got less than half of our energy reserves left, then we'll know that it's probably more sensible to turn back. We have brought food and water and everything, and I'm with a friend today. I didn't really want to do this on my own because if I don't know, collapse or something or break my leg out here, there would be nobody to assist me. So there's 2 of us, which makes it a lot safer. My friend doesn't want to be on the camera. So this is our methodology, which is scoop the rocks. I'm then shaking that up at eye level to make sure that we are level with the brim. The accuracy of this cup doesn't matter a great deal. This is my kind of standardized fisherman's handful, but because we're counting and weighing, really what we're interested in is the average weight of the stones. And we'll obviously measure to get the average size. The count of the stones in the pot should give us a rough idea of the size of the stones, but it's not our primary measurement. So that's a pot full of stones. That weighs 556.2. So that's half a kilo. In fact, just over half a kilo. So in case you were wondering why we don't just pick up the stones from the sample points and carry them home and weigh them and measure them at our leisure at home, there could be your answer. That's half a kilo of stones. There are 33 waypoints that we're measuring here along the way. I'll leave you to do the maths on that, but that's more stones than I would ever want to carry on a 10-mile hike. Anyway, so the next thing we do is tip those out and count them. And so we're going to count these, enter the count, and then I'll measure them. And for the measurements, actually, well, when we get to the measurements, I'll stop and I'll show you what we're actually doing, because it is quite interesting. These stones have all got a shape to them, and it makes measuring them actually quite easy. So my measurement method here, the stones have got a kind of flattened jelly bean shape to them. That makes measuring them coherently quite easy. In fact, I'll pick a larger outlier so we can actually see what we're doing. Can you see how the stone has got a kind of flattened jelly bean shape to it? So it's got a distinct length dimension, it's got a distinct width dimension, and it's got a distinct thickness, which is the thinnest dimension. So yeah, so measuring consistently, obviously we're not getting the volume of the stone from that, but what we are getting is a bounding cuboid for the stone, and that will help me to sort the measurements into ascending size. because my intention is I will arrange all of my measurements. We're taking 12 samples at each point. I'll arrange those 12 samples in the ascending order of the volume of their bounding cuboid, and we'll discard the top few and the bottom few, so that we're discarding the kind of statistical outliers, and we're getting the meat of the statistical data in the middle, which is the kind of consistent, typical size of pebbles from the middle of the data. Hopefully that makes sense. Of course, all of that data is still going to be in the spreadsheet, and I will publish the spreadsheet. So if you want to analyze it yourself in a different way, then you'll be able to do that. Right, anyway, measuring time now. So just what I'm going to do is pick up a handful, and I'm going to measure 12 stones from out of this sample. I'm not being particular about which ones I've picked up. So we are going to find that even though the stones going along the beach are trending larger, and we have noticed that with one little statistical blip, I'm not going to pick out the big stones from this handful. I'm just going to pick out the first 12 I find. So let's just do the first measurement, which is 15.25, and that's the length dimension of that pebble. I shan't do the other two because we've got to write it down. What I'm also doing at each waypoint is we're going to take a photograph of the stones just in the natural state on the beach there, including the data capture in the photographs. So I've got a backup of that as we go as well. So everything is duplicated here so that we don't lose data on this kind of once in a lifetime mission. I really don't want to come back and have to repeat these measurements because, as I say, did I mention something 10-mile hike on gravel? Anyway, so I'll take a photograph of that, and then we also take a photograph of a few stones with the square around them on the back of the tray, so we've got a kind of clean measurement of individual stones. If people want to try and measure them from photos, I don't think you'll get as accurate as I do with the calipers. So here's an interesting collection of stuff we've just happened upon. Obviously been arranged here, somebody's put this here. I don't know whether this is a sculpture or whether this is just somebody attempting to tidy up the beach. There is a rather distressing amount of waste that's on the top here. Oh, there's a couple more buoys over there, probably from here, that have detached and blown back down there. But yeah, there's quite a lot of debris on the beach, plastic waste. And normally I would try and pick up as much of this plastic waste as I can, but I'm already sort of loaded to capacity anyway with the water I need to carry for today, and food and equipment. So unfortunately the beach cleanup is going to have to wait for another time. We are now quite a long way away from where the people fishing get to, and it is still quite a long way to Portland. It doesn't look like it's any closer than it was, but obviously it must be. We walked about 1.75 miles so far. This is quite interesting actually. I've never seen this part of the back of Chesil Beach before, and you can see there's some really quite big carved out gullies there, presumably where water has washed right over and then flooded down this side. So here's a question for locals who know this beach better than I do. Do waves overtop this beach? It certainly looks like maybe they do. I thought maybe that was a deer skull there with antlers, but it's not. Anyway, interesting question. How did all this debris, how does all this big debris get up on top of the beach here? Did it wash over here? It does look like waves, perhaps, when it's stormy conditions, overtop this beach and then wash forcefully down this side. So we are a quarter of the way along our journey. It's taken us 2 hours so far, so we stand a good chance of finishing this before it gets completely dark this evening. But we're a quarter of the way along the isolated bit of Chesil Beach, and it is incredibly tranquil here, apart from all of the rubbish, which is unfortunate. There's a funny little shack over there, boathouse or something. Apart from that, really very, very little sign of human habitation or anything. So anyway, we're going to press on. The weird thing that's been happening is the stones are changing, but the measurement changes between our subsequent stops are so subtle that I think we might see some noise in the signal, and it's getting very hard to, it's almost like disappointing when we stop at the next waypoint and find the stones aren't all that different. I will be very interested to see what the plot looks like when we finish all of this, because I suspect we're going to find that the gradient of stones along this beach, the gradient of sizes, is far from linear. But that, of course, is the purpose of what we're doing today, is to discover whether that's the case, to see if there's anything interesting about the data. As you can see, there are footprints in the gravel, so it's not as if nobody ever comes along here, but also there aren't that many. So there's tracks down there, so somebody's plodded along there and down along the coastline. We're staying up on top of this flat bit because it's really very difficult to walk on the slope, and if you get all the way down into the surf zone, it can be actually dangerous. It's not probably very dangerous today because the sea is quite calm, but people do get washed into the sea, and it's very difficult to get back out again because the bank slopes sharply down into the water. One of the questions that's, I don't think, completely answered is, how did these pebbles, if indeed they are arranged in a smooth gradient from one end to the other, how did that happen? How did that come to be? And so one of the possible explanations is there's some kind of asymmetric thing going on with the waves. So there are waves that come in where the wave front is parallel to the shore, but if we look over there, you can see wave fronts that are coming in maybe at a 45-degree angle to the shore. And so something like that, something that perhaps comes in at an angle and then washes back down perpendicular to the shoreline, could be an asymmetric thing that maybe could wash everything up in a diagonal line and then maybe only wash the smaller things back down straight in the relatively lower energy sort of retreating wave. As far as I know, no absolutely complete explanation for how this stone bank got to be how it is. Not just the gradation of the stones, but actually how this enormous bank of shingle came up and deposited here has not been conclusively answered. There are competing theories for it. So there is a lot more science to be done here than we're going to actually even scratch the surface of today. So we keep finding pieces of this all the way along here, which is, it looks like it's a rail off of the top of some guardrail or something like that. But we found pieces of this all the way along the beach. So wherever that came from, a lot of it got deposited at the same time. So something broke up. I don't think it's part of a ship. It might be part of a shack or something like that. And I've just noticed here concrete footings from what would have been a structure, probably a pillbox, and that's all that's left of it now. Or that could be the roof of the pillbox and the whole thing might have sunk into the gravel over time. Also, further down the beach, I see a boat pulled up on the shore, and I saw a person moving there, so that could be the first human that we're going to see in this trip since we left all the people fishing behind. Anyway, onward. We are noticing a slight increase now in the size of the stones, and that's being borne out somewhat by the measurements, but not what looks like a very conspicuous pattern, at least not from looking just at numbers. So you know how something, every now and again, something makes you stop and say, oh boy. Well, oh boy. I don't know what this is. It looks like it should be floating out there somewhere, probably anchored to the seabed, and it isn't. Look, navigation buoy or something like that perhaps. I shan't interfere with it, but we will have a little look at it from various angles. I assume there's going to be something on top. Oh. Well, there's a kind of keyway for something to fit on top, I think, if indeed that is the top. Maybe that's the bottom. Anybody know what that is? Let me know in the comments. We got another pillbox, and certainly wasn't built on that angle. Indeed, hang on a minute. Is that meant to be on there? Has the whole of this thing been shifted off of its footings? It looks like it has. It's the right dimensions. Well, you could take shelter in there in a storm if you needed to. I'm not going to go in there, but that looks to me, well, I don't know, maybe there were two things here, and that's the bottom half of that one and that's the top half of the other one, but it does look like that would fit on there. No, in fact it's not. I'll tell you why. There's the steps to get into that one, and they're on this back wall, and the door to this one is on the left hand side, so not the same thing. I'm going to say this might have been the latrines, and that might have been the lookout post, or something. Maybe this was the bunkhouse, I don't know. But anyway, there we are, military structures from, no doubt from World War II. If you've got any theories on why this thing is divided exactly in half, do let me know. Onward, our next measurement point is just a little way along here, and we are about a third of the way along the beach now, and making good time. We're at measurement point 11, and there's been a little weird anomaly in the numbers here. We counted more stones in the cup than we did last time by quite a margin. And it's just because there's a whole load of tiny stones in the mix. Now, that is going to skew our figures, but we can't ignore that. We can't pretend that didn't happen. However, I've documented this because that it probably is going to need to explain why this little bit of the graph does a weird thing. We just happen to have picked a sample that's probably a little bit atypical for the beach, because if you look around, you know, again, if we do our fisherman's handful, we're seeing stones like this, not stones like that. So I don't know, you know, there's always going to be some measurement weirdness in this, but hopefully we'll still see a picture. So weirdly, we didn't see the counterpart of this fence at the other end, but we must have gone past it. But yeah, there was no access on this bit of the beach, probably only on the right hand side of the beach here, the land side, which has got some level areas where nesting birds will create their nest and reproduce there. So no access along Chesil Beach from 1st of May to 31st of August. Fortunately, we are outside of that date range. We're now into September, so we're okay. We didn't break the rules. So here's an interesting little structure right in the middle, well, almost in the middle of Chesil Beach, a tiny little cottage. I assume that's like a fisherman's hut or something. You may have noticed a slight change in the weather. It's tipping it down at the moment, but we're over a third of the way along now, and the only way out is through. So oh my gosh. So we've just done checkpoint 13, so we're between 13 and 14 now, and something that we didn't really completely anticipate but also couldn't control is it rained quite heavily just a moment ago, which means that our weights for the pebbles that we weighed at the last station have got a film of water on them, which is inevitably going to make a little bit of a difference. So I don't know whether we'll see that in the graph, but if there is a little step in the graph, that could be why. I've got to say, we're coming up we're over 1/3 of the way now, and it doesn't seem like there is that much of a perceptible difference in the size of the stones. They are getting a bit bigger, but I wouldn't call the difference a marked difference, but perhaps we'll see, judging it by eye, when we're not the legendary fisherman. Maybe is our flaw. Anyway, onward to the next one. Now, one thing I am seeing a lot more of now we're nearer this end is these drifts of larger pebbles. So one thing that's a possible explanation for this whole fisherman's handful thing is maybe the thing they were noticing was a greater occurrence of larger outliers. I don't know. But then, yeah, you go into a patch like this and we're back to mostly very regular sized stones. So another little shack here clearly belongs to whoever goes fishing here. Storage for lobster pots, crab pots, boat equipment and whatnot. It would be fun to go and explore that, but it's private property, so we will just make sure that we don't trip over their ropes and things, and we'll be on our way. Over the water there, that's Moonfleet Manor. Okay, we are past halfway now. Moonfleet Manor is behind us. It looks tantalizingly close to Portland there. My intuition is to look at that and say, oh, that's less than an hour's walk. In reality, that's still probably about 4 hours walk. It doesn't look like it, does it? Anyway, onward. We are noticing definitely the rocks have got bigger now and rounder. Back at the start they were kind of flattened bean shape. Here they're a little bit more just not flattened bean shape. Anyway, onward. We're making good time, but we are probably only just going to make it. So we have been walking 5 hours to get just past halfway, which was more or less what we expected. You can't go fast on this terrain. Well, I can't anyway. So we're at measurement point 19 out of 33, so well past halfway now, and there is a marked difference in the number of stones we're getting in a cup now. So it has 70 something here as opposed to 400 up at the other end, and obviously as we go on that's going to reduce further. So for measuring these stones, what I'm doing is, with my eyes closed, just grabbing a handful, and then my measuring method is, as I said before, these stones have all got a kind of flatness to them and they're elongated. So I'm measuring the longest distance first, 25.8, 18.21, and then the thickness, 9.96. Now this might seem like a terribly inaccurate way to be measuring stones. 35.71, 23.34, 9.7, but my friend took a stone off me after I'd measured it and then gave it back to me at the end of the session to measure again, and my error is in second digit of the fractions of millimeters, so it's in the hundredths of millimeter. So I'm fairly confident we're getting decent measurements ish, or as good as can be expected out here. 32.59, 14.97, 13.06, 26.79, 17.23, 8.84. And then at the end of each session I'm photographing the natural surface of the stones here like this with the measurements. That's my backup of those measurements, and then we'll drop that out. Give you that. We'll put the tray in and put the square back, and just a handful of stones there as a representative sample, and again another photograph. So more little shacks and huts and dwellings and whatever here. We're just about to enter the edge of the Chickerell firing range here, which is a military shooting range. I don't know if you can see over there, there's a big pile of sand. That's probably a backstop for a rifle range perhaps, or some shooting range. The shooting range starts over there, extends right across Chesil, across the Fleet Lagoon, and the exclusion zone extends right out to sea. So on firing days, you're not allowed to walk through this bit. So on the Ministry of Defence website, they publish the days when they're going to be firing here. I've never actually seen it. I've never been to that site and actually seen a live firing warning. But we did check that before we came. Because, well, imagine somebody would actually stop us entering the range. It's probably a sentry here when there is live firing. But in any case, I wanted to make sure not only that we didn't take a risk, but that this expedition wasn't going to be nobbled 3/4 of the way through, because we're well past halfway now and we got to finish this. So yeah, I think this is more than likely a sentry station where, when there is live firing of artillery across the Chickerell range, the guy in here will stop you walking down the beach, I assume. This is the most modern looking structure we've actually seen today. We've still got quite a long way to go, but I don't know, we must be getting on for 2/3 now. We're past measurement point 19 out of 33. So let's just have a listen to the gravel here between 19 and 20. Right, sample point 20 is done, and we are on our way again. This is the flagpole, and when there's a red flag here, it means don't go across the beach. This is the firing range. This is the dangerous bit, except not today. One of the things we've been cautioned about on the government website, on the MOD website, is not to pick up anything that looks like shiny metal. I don't think they shoot explosive ordnance across here, although you'd never know, and they wouldn't tell us if they did. But yeah, don't touch anything that looks like it might go boom. We should just stop and actually reflect on how far we've come. Can't even see the point we started. It's so far in the distance. I can't even see the end of the Fleet Lagoon now. It's a long, long way, but still quite a long way to the end. We're about 2/3 of the way. Now, it may occur to you to wonder why we're taking our measurements up here on the top of the gravel bank, when the myth that we're testing is about the fishermen picking up a handful of gravel down there on the shore. There is a practicality issue here. We did try walking down the shore when we first got here. We just tested it out to see what it would be like, and it's the actual going down there on the ridges that are formed by the surf. It's like twice as hard to walk down there as it is up here on the top, and we're only just going to have enough time to complete this walk during daylight hours today. It's taken us about 6 hours so far, and we're only 2/3 of the way. So it's just not practical for us to go and test on the shore there. I think if you were going to do that, you'd have to have a boat and make stops and do it. If you want to test the fisherman's myth, get yourself a boat, go and do stops on the shore. We're going to measure up on the top here. There's still going to be a trend, we hope. We're still going to show something, because what we did do is actually pick up a handful of gravel from the top here and walk down to the shore and compare it with the gravel at the shore, just to verify that we were not fooling ourselves, and it is very similar. So I'm happy that what we're doing up here is still a representative sample of the beach. It's not an exact match, but that's the closest we can practically do in the time available to us with the resources we have. So another sentry box here. I'm assuming that means we are now exiting the firing zone. I think there would have been another flagpole here. So we're now in the clear. If anybody shoots us from now on, it's probably not the army. Pair of boots there, how handy. It is a bit sad and depressing seeing the amount of plastic waste and stuff that's just washed up on the top of the shore here. Obviously carrying it out of here would be nearly impossible, at least for us. We're already fully loaded, but it is just disappointing to see it all. A lot of this obviously isn't plastic, but a lot of this is driftwood and cuttle bones and other bits and pieces, crab shells, but there's a lot of plastic waste here, and it all seems to have ended up on the top here. So I do think that even though the sea does look a long way down there, I have a feeling that waves do crest over this bank in a big storm. That must be quite a phenomenon, and probably not a safe place to be when that sort of thing's happening. But yeah, see quite a few of these around today. That's a spider crab shell, a very old and weathered one. Anyway, on we go. Now I'm just at this point catching sight of the fishing community at the Portland end, so it means, well, we are getting there. Well, this is interesting. Portland Boundstone, so the boundary of Portland. That one there looks like it might be the old boundary stone. And a glove. Long time atomic shrimp people will know this means something to me. I used to collect photographs of lost gloves. I don't anymore. I stopped after a few thousand. We're in between measurement points 23 and 24. Let's just have a listen to the stones. So we're getting down to the point now where there's only about 50 stones in the cup that we're using as our measure, which is our fisherman's handful. And I mean, perhaps if I show you, a handful of stones does indeed look different here than it did way at the other end of the beach, but it's a long beach, so just knowing that you're at one end or the other is not necessarily all that useful. So we do still need to look at the data. We're going to measure these now. One thing I did note though actually is that on the back of the Fleet Lagoon there aren't very many landmarks, so there is notionally a need to know where you are on this beach. We're talking about the days before GPS and stuff like that, so this is fishermen in days of old coming up on the beach and wanting to know where they are. Even if you climb up to the top of the bank and look across, assuming there's no fog, there aren't very many landmarks to be able to figure out where you are. So it is plausible that they would need to know where they are and would wish to know where they are on the beach. So, you know, I don't know if that adds any weight to the theory or not, but it's a thing. So yeah, scenery is changing. We can see very clearly town of Fortunesville on the Isle of Portland there. This is like the narrow point of the Fleet Lagoon, and I can see people fishing that have hiked this way from Portland end. So we are now getting to the point where it is within sensible walking distance, that is walking distance for sensible people, from the other end. But it's still a way to go. It's still something like, well, it's over 4 kilometers to go. Don't look it, does it? Can't even hear it at the moment. Something black helicopters. Anyway, onward. I'm not really liking the look of the sky up there. Hopefully we'll stay ahead of it, but we've got coats and stuff, and we've dealt with rain before. There was only one point where it was really pelting down, and only one of our measurements was hampered by rain. Anyway, we've just done measurement 25 of 33. Let's just have a listen to the stones. Actually, that might not be representative because there's only the one of me walking here. Let me just wait for my friend to catch up. One thing I'm noticing here is almost like a squeaking sound. See if I can get it. Like a chirping sound when I tread on the ground. And I'm sure it's not small birds. I think it's just where these pebbles are all quite spherical. And this is a phenomenon like that singing sand. And so they're kind of rubbing against each other. I don't think I can get a decent sample of it, but I keep hearing it. We're passing a whole little village of various shacks and things here. Quite a lot of stuff on this shore of the Fleet Lagoon near the Portland end, and I'm starting to see lots of people up there. We are returning to civilization. So we're down to the point now where there are only 33 rocks in our standardized fisherman's handful cup. When we get down to the point where we can't even fit 12 rocks in the cup, we're going to have to start weighing and measuring differently, just because I want to make sure that our weight is still an average of at least a few rocks. So when we get to that point, we'll have to make some adjustments, and our fisherman's handful will be however many will fit in the cup, but we'll do a separate average weight for the stones on a larger sample, something like that. So there'll be two sets of data, so we'll be able to analyze it both ways if we want to, but it's just when we get to the far end at Portland, we may even get to the point where one rock won't even fit in the cup, and then the fisherman's handful is going to be one rock. But I still want to get an average of a sample of rocks, if that makes sense. Anyway, hopefully it'll all make sense when we see the spreadsheet. We've just completed measurement number 26 out of 33, and I can see Ferry Bridge. I don't want to sound like I haven't enjoyed today, because it has actually been fantastic. It's been amazing to get out here and do this thing that I've been dreaming about for years, and you know, cross this off the list and actually capture the data so that we can do the science on it, or science adjacent on it. But I shall be glad when it's over, and I'm kind of glad I don't have to do this again. So these look like oyster beds to me. If you're a local and you know what these are, do let me know in the comments. There's somebody walking out there in the water, wading, with two dogs by the look of it. So not very deep out there. Somebody else on a little sandbar out there, probably cockling or something like that, maybe. The tide must be out, I guess. So I'm happy to report that I recognise that wall there. That we've seen in a previous video, I think, perhaps, when I came fishing here. This is a part of Chesil Beach I've brought you to before in a previous video, in that video where I went fishing and didn't catch anything. So we are back in home territory now. The end is in sight. That's the visitor centre over there, which is our pickup point. But we haven't finished our survey because we've got to go all the way to the island and the end of the beach. So we've got another 4 or 5 survey points to do still, and then we'll head back to the visitor centre for retrieval and hopefully have some fish and chips on the way home. Right, we just finished checkpoint 29. Let's have a listen to these rocks. And that concludes the listening to the rocks. The Isle of Portland now looking tantalisingly close, but that's still over a mile away. So we're coming up on measurement point 31 in a minute, and this is what it sounds like here. And honestly, I am so glad we walked this direction and not the other direction. I think walking on these larger stones, it's just a lot firmer underfoot. It's still quite punishing on the legs, but it's a lot easier than the fine gravel up at the Abbotsbury end. So I am so glad we did it this way. Otherwise we'd have arrived tired at the other end with the hardest bit of the walk ahead of us. So, well, a little tip if you're considering being mad enough to replicate this experiment: start at Abbotsbury, walk towards Portland. Only 2 more measurement points now to go, and the Isle of Portland, that was a tiny speck when we set out, is now filling the horizon. It's nice to have the end in sight. And this is what the gravel sounds like here. Well, I don't know that we can really call this gravel anymore. One more measurement point to go. We've just done 32. I just want to see if I can capture a property of these pebbles that I've been talking about earlier, which is their squeakiness when they rub together. Well, hopefully you can get an idea of that, but when you're walking on them, there's like a little chirping sound you keep hearing. Well, hopefully you got an idea of it there anyway. So we are just about to arrive at our final checkpoint. There is a bit more beach beyond the final calculated checkpoint, but there's not another 500 meters of it, so we can't add another one on there, or else the graph would be, that would mess up the scale on the graph. So final checkpoint is here, and I hope you can see a really big difference between this and the stones at the start of the beach. When we got down to this end, this is the last sample, sample 33. We are literally nearly end of the beach here. We couldn't even fit 12 stones in the tub, so we've measured the tub, which contained 8 stones, and the weight for that will give us our average. But in order to still sample 12 stones, we weighed another 4 stones as well, and then measured all 12 stones, so that we've got an average of 12 stones for our measurements, and we can look at either the average for the 8 or the average for the 12 for the weight, for the average weight, and we'll see. And hopefully that'll still give us the same kind of thing, numbers anyway, but at least then we've got the choice. So that is the conclusion of the measurements, and now we've just got to walk back to the visitor centre, which now looks quite a long way away. Oh boy. So that's the last measurement, and this is what the stones sound like at the Portland end of the beach, and they really are cobbles here. And there's still this squeaking when they're chattering against each other. So yeah, back on the firm ground, I think. So this is the first firm ground we're going to have stepped on after 10 miles of walking on cobbles. And yet, as we expected, it does feel super strange to be walking on not so yielding ground. Actually quite nice. So nearly back at the visitor centre for retrieval. we say goodbye to Chesil Beach, which we completed our task with over an hour's daylight left, probably an hour and a half of daylight left, so there was nothing to worry about on that front. But yeah, so that's wave goodbye to Chesil Beach. Thank you for having us. We've got all of the data. Now all that's left to do is go home and crunch the numbers. So this is the conclusion of part 1 of this 2-part video. I originally intended to put the data analysis in here too, but the video is already nearly an hour long and there are some interesting things to say about the results. I've already bashed the numbers into a spreadsheet, but I want to spend a bit more time thinking about it. Even at this point, a couple of days after the survey, there are still fresh talking points surfacing in my head, and I don't want to rush the discussion of those. What I will do now, though, is present you with this sequence of the photos I took of the natural surface of the stones at each of the 33 survey points along the 16-kilometre length of the survey. I'll play this through a couple of times at different speeds. While that's playing, I thought it's probably just worth talking about the beach in general. I don't know how well it comes across in the video, but the shingle bank we were walking on is truly colossal. I don't think photos or videos can ever do proper justice to the monumental scale of the thing. It is more than just a beach, it's a natural wonder. It's probably easy to imagine that I might be overemphasizing the strange sense of remoteness that this place has to it. We are, after all, at the broadest point of the Fleet Lagoon, still never more than 1 kilometre away from civilization, as the crow flies, that is. But there is still a real sense of desolate remoteness here, and that's just not all that common here in the south of England. And you might be tempted to think that I overplayed the safety stuff and the preparation. And we were lucky to have picked a good day for this trip. In worse weather, this beach can claim human lives. Every year, 1 or 2 people die here. Even though this is not the most popular beach for visitors, a lot of people come here for fishing, and that necessitates getting close to the surf zone. I don't have any footage of this place in a storm, but I understand that when tide and storm surge conditions coincide, the waves do indeed wash right over the top of the Chesil Bank, and those kind of carved formations we saw on the walk, which are called cans, I understand, and they are due to water either draining through the beach or over the top of it. And this beach is over 15 metres high above sea level in most places, so that must be quite a phenomenal thing when it happens. Here's some footage from Seatown, near the northwesternmost end of Chesil Beach, on a day that was merely blustery. And even here, those waves churning the surf zone are over 2 metres high, and when they break, they turn the surface of rounded pebbles into a sort of turbulent fluid that you couldn't possibly stand up in. If you fell in there, you'd be very lucky to get back out alive. Anyway, it wasn't like that on the day we went, but even then, 10 miles on loose, yielding, rounded pebbles is quite enough of a trek for one day. I happened to bump into a fan of the channel a couple of days after our trip and mentioned that this video was coming. It turned out that they, a much younger and fitter person than me, had once made the same trip, cycling to Abbotsbury early in the morning, then walking to Portland, pushing the bike along the beach. And they finished the trip in total darkness and on the brink of hypothermia. I am very glad to have had a friend with me for this journey. My original plan to walk this on my own was probably not quite viable. For mundane reasons, such as one person measuring rocks with the other person writing down the numbers, is vastly quicker than one person doing it alone. But also for more fundamental reasons. If one of us fell or got injured or felt sick, the other could provide first aid or call for rescue. And just walking as a pair, it's much easier to keep a steady, reasonable pace and keep an eye on each other's well-being. By way of illustration, at one point I was talking to the camera about how far we still had to go, and I simply couldn't recall the name of the island at the end. The fact that it's called Portland is not in any way unfamiliar to me, but my energy levels and hydration had probably taken a little dip without me really noticing that this had happened. My friend advised me to stop a while and take some refreshment, so I think if I'd just attempted this alone, whilst I might not have put myself in mortal danger, I may have just kept trudging along right to the point of exhaustion, and then I might have had to stop and rest for longer, and as a result maybe finished much later in darkness and colder conditions. As it was, the survey walk, including the stops, took us nearly 10 hours, and at this time of year there's only about 11 hours of sunlight. Anyway, I'll talk some more about the logistics and plan versus reality in part 2, but that's it for part 1 of this mini-series. If you're watching this at the time of publication, part 2, data analysis and further reflections, will be next week. If you're watching it much later, part 2 should already be linked in the card and description. I hope this has been interesting, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.